Hello, and welcome to the ninth step to an enlightened mind and to transcending stress and suffering. Now, I'll just do a little bit of a review before we get into this step and remind you that all the steps really overlap, and that really almost any one step can maybe snap you into that awareness of who you really are as consciousness. It's been said that enlightenment can happen, or this enlightened mind can turn on to being aware of yourself as the light of consciousness through mystical experiences, really profound, extraordinary experiences. Just happens in a moment. It's what William James, in his varieties of religious experience that he wrote 100 years ago, a metanoia, a complete shift in attitude, a kind of a turning inward and realizing. And that happens once and for all, and you're there. But the other way is what we're doing, based on the ancient tradition of Vedanta, and even on the more modern version of that, which is A Course in Miracles, where you realize such affirmations as I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me, or I am spirit, or spirit am I. And again, what we're saying, unlike the Course, that spirit is essentially awareness or consciousness. And consciousness implies being aware of something, according to the Course. And so they don't like to use the word consciousness. But for our purposes, consciousness and awareness, that light that we are. And what's interesting is that these enlightened masters have such a light in them, despite, like in this current situation of the pandemic, despite the limitations that people are having. It's like my basketball coach in high school used to say, which used to kind of irritate us, but it was profound. He would say, after we won a game, now, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And it would have been nice to kind of have him allow us to sort of revel in the win on Friday night and not worry about the next game, which was always on a Tuesday and a Friday. So this too shall pass, guys. So we got to get ready for the next game. Well, I'd like to enjoy the win for a minute, but that's true. So this too shall pass. The pandemic will pass. You know, the Spanish flu came in 1918. That pandemic, there's been others. I had polio in the last epidemic of polio that happened in the state of Delaware, and that passed. And so the thing about realizing who we are as consciousness, as awareness, we are that which is unchanging. We are that, as we talked about last week, we are that space, like the empty space of a room that Rupert Spira uses as an analogy. We're like the sky, like I suggested you would every once in a while look at the blue sky, breathe in and say, I am like the sky, breathing out, unchanged by the clouds passing through me or the planes or whatever is happening in the sky. Or I am breathing in like the sky at night with all the stars orbiting around and coming through that space of black velvety sky. So whether it's the blue sky or the black sky at night, I am that space. Well, today, what we're going to talk about is I am that which is like silence. And why? Because I am that silent space in which all the sounds, outer sounds, horns honking, the recycle truck coming and clanging with picking up the cans and bottles as the glass and the metal hit each other. I am that in which the sounds, inner sounds of my thoughts are coming and going. Because really, like Eckhart Tolle has said, our mind in essentially is almost like a noise machine, constantly, as I say, like a sports commentator calling the game of our life. But unlike the sports commentator, he's actually influencing the game of our life. He's not just commenting on what's happening. He's directing it in some ways. So getting a breather from that constant commenting, getting a breather, because so much of it is repetition. We'll get that sort of like song that gets in our head, becomes sort of this constant, like a worm, repeating and continuing. And so this becoming more conscious, every once in a while taking a conscious breath, stop, breathing in. I can keep my mind cool, breathing out, and my body calm no matter what. Now, another one I would add for today is stop, breathing in. I breathe in and stop and still my mind, making it like a still pond instead of a raging river. Breathing out and a calm, still body. Breathing in, I can stop and still my mind. Breathing out, I stop and still my body. Breathing in, I stop and still my mind. Breathing out, I stop and still my body. So the inner counterpart to silence is, as we tune into silence, you'll notice a stillness. Again, the mind becomes like a still, clear pond instead of a disturbed pond that's stirred up and the silt on the bottom is stirred up so that you can't see to the bottom. So that breathing in, I stop and still my mind, like that pond, still, everything's settled so it's clear. And breathing out, I stop and still my body. So when you think about it, think about this, that without the silent space between the notes, there's no music. And so the song, the lyrics of the song, the lyrics and the soundtrack of the song we call our life requires the breathing room of that silent space between the notes and the lyrics. That is what makes our life more enjoyable and more peaceful. Okay? So, every once in a while, as you go through your day, pay attention. Just tune in, not just to the empty space of the room or of wherever you are. If you're outside in nature, look at the space between the trees and the grass and the sky, the space between the clouds, and let that refer you back to that inner space within you, that peaceful inner space. Like the sky, unmoving, unchanging, and things are moving and changing through it, sounds and sights. And so as you tune into that silence, you'll find yourself becoming still. And that proverb from a biblical proverb, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am fundamental reality experience is God, is your divine nature, is that divine nature, is that extension of that vast, absolute one reality. So when you tune in to silence or you tune into space, let that refer you back to the space and the silence, or the silent space of the light of consciousness and awareness that you are, in which all this change is happening. The pandemic is getting worse or it's getting better. Things are happening in the course of the day. The day is progressing from morning to afternoon to evening to night. All this is constant change. It's like Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, put it. You can't step into the same river twice. Why? Because the water is changing all the time. But you, that which is aware and knows these objects, whether it's a river, whether it's clouds, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the sound of music playing in the background, the sounds of horns honking, whatever, you are that space in which that passes through without hitting a solid object. When you're identified with your body and mind, you're meditating, you hear the sound of a raging motorcycle go by, and suddenly, oh, you're irritated, your mind reacts, your body tenses up in reaction. You judge, I hate that sound. Then come back, let that sound, let that object refer you back to the space that you are. Feel it, see it, feel it, and it becomes reality. So, if you can remember that anything that comes up you can use to refer you back. This is a little different than mindfulness, where mindfulness, you become aware of what is happening. Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, sights, sounds, and you're being present and you're watching and listening, seeing and hearing these things. In this case, you're noticing that you're seeing and hearing. You're noticing the sound. You're noticing like you're seeing my image on the screen, and you're letting that, in my sound of my words, and you're letting that refer you back to that which knows and is aware of that. Because remember the definition of consciousness that Rupert Spira gave us. Consciousness is that in which all experience appears, disappears, comes and goes. Consciousness is that by which, with which, all experience is known. And lastly, consciousness is that out of which all my experience is made, because all my experience is based on my being aware of it and knowing it. And so when I touch the desk, all I know of the desk is the sensing of it, the touching of it. And then all I know of sensing and touching is really the knowing of it. Or all I know of hearing the sound of the songs playing in the background, the horns honking, all I know of them is the hearing of them. And all I know of the hearing is the knowing of the hearing. All I know of the seeing of the tree outside is the knowing of the seeing. And all I know of the seeing is really the knowing of it. So when you really ground your experience in what it is, it's really in knowing. And what is knowing or knowingness but consciousness or awareness? So all that you experience is made out of that. So I once saw the movie What the Bleep, and I remember in the beginning, something was said that really pointed me back to this, and it was this. It was that, what is it that lets me know that this desk that I'm touching is here, that it's solid and it's hard? What is it that lets me know that this is concrete, solid reality, supposedly material reality? What lets me know that? But something in here that's invisible and can't be seen, touched, tasted, smelled, heard, thought about. Think about that. That this invisible thing that's not graspable is what's telling me that this that I'm touching is solid and real. So that the scientist that says, I know this is concrete reality, this is solid. What is it that's telling you that it's solid? Where is that? Where can the brain surgeon cut into the brain and find that? He can't. That's why the whole reversal of our everyday experience from growing up, where we're given a name, that we're finally, after we're like 2 or so, we can respond to our name and begin to say mother, father, mommy, daddy, and get these names and forms that we locate and we define that. And so all these names and forms, trees, cars, computers, people, places, all are names and forms. And then we identify as a name, which your name is, and your form as a body, and that which becomes basically ego, and that becomes the suffering self. Now, one last thing. When I talked about these profound experiences, for example, if you may know of Eckhart Tolle's experience, where he was really depressed and anxious, and he was in graduate school, and he wasn't happy, and he found himself waking up one night feeling really anxious and depressed, and he said, I had a loathing for everything in the room. Everything was loathsome, and the most loathsome thing of all, that he was himself. And he had this sentence come to him, which almost was like a Zen koan, Koan, a sentence or a statement like, what's the sound of one hand clapping, which makes your mind freeze up and stop, and then you can get beyond your mind. And what happened then was, he said, I can no longer live with myself, something like that. I can no longer live with myself. And is there two of me or one of me? The I that can't live with myself. Maybe there's only one. And then it is as if his mind froze up and he felt a vortex of energy that kind of was going around, and he felt himself sink into that. And suddenly he was scared, terrified, and suddenly he heard a voice deep within say, resist nothing. And that passed, that whole experience, he just forgot. He sunk into it. And when he woke up in the morning and he looked out at the light coming in, filtering in the early dawn, it was like a luminosity. It was like love itself. Everything had a certain glow. He picked up a pencil, and it was like, wow. You're suddenly seeing the world in a new light. It was like a major shift that took place. He sat on park benches in this blissful state for months and years, I guess. And even then, he began to read and really find out what had happened was that consciousness had suddenly withdrawn from this little suffering self, this identification with body-mind. And what was left was nothing other than the ever-present I am, consciousness in its pure state prior to identifying with this name and form. And so, this week, as you tune into the space of silence, just once in a while, even though there's sounds happening that may be irritating or good sounds, nice music that you like, let that refer you back to where you can settle in and kind of sink back into that inner recliner within yourself that is awareness, that is the light of consciousness. And that silence and that space, that's what we're talking about. So have a great week, and keep every so often taking some time to notice the silent space between the sounds, whether inner, your thoughts, or outer, those sounds in the world.